different ways the people those are some of the major ways people believe about the Bible. It's not the only ways, and so you can choice 6 can be your other. You can even type in your into the chat anything that you feel is better than any of those choices. That'll be part of our ways to have rich discussion. So. All right. We're on the hour. Has everybody had a chance to vote in the poll? And you can do more than one choice.
Can you do more than one vote?
Yes, you can, because there are some things there. More than one of those things could be something believe or feel or yeah.
Can you pull it back up, Chris?
Actually, Mark's the one who can see it. We're having Zoom problems with the poll. I wrote, for whatever reason, I wrote the poll, and then when Mark came on, it disappeared from my computer. Now it's on his. So
that's okay. I did 6 because I didn't know any of the others.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I could go over. Some of those are not self-evident. So the inerrant word of God means without error. You know, the word of God without error or falsehood or anything. The inspired word of God is one of those, you know, there's a loophole, as it were, that there's some divine role in the creation of the book, but it, you know, inspired. I guess that's open to more than one interpretation about what inspired means, but it is often what's used. So if you're talking with people, sometimes they'll say, "I believe in the inspired word of God." It's something other than the inerrant word of God is when they're saying that. The next one is actually comes from John Buren's. He says the Bible is a human book about the divine, not a divine book about humanity. So that's kind of I thought an interesting in between spot before we get to a human book. And I was trying to figure out how to frame that, because, you know, you could think it's a human book in more than one way. And so I decided to frame it does more good than harm, and a human book that does more harm than good as a way to capture some of the ways, some of the ways what the word human can mean. As my preaching professor said, if you stand up in the pulpit and say, "I'm human," someone will ask, "With who and how often?" So the word human means different things to different people and different situations. So and then there's choice 6 because I couldn't figure out how to delete it. But if that's other, and you can vote for more than one, because you could have there, and it looks like Chris has put in another way, one of a variety of texts that each attempt to guide a major world religion. So, yeah.
And which translation?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to vote? Okay. You want to show us the results, Mark?
Yep. Can everyone see them, or do I need to read them?
No.
I can't see them.
I got Luther here in case you want it.
Can anybody see them?
I can see them.
That's okay. But I need somebody to tell me what they are. Mark, you want to say? We can't hear you, Mark, for some reason.
A human book about the divine, 59%.
Yeah.
The inerrant word of God is 0%.
No surprise.
The inspired word of God is 5% with one person. A human book about the divine, not a divine book about humans, is 59% with 13. A human book that does more good than harm is 14% with 3 people. And then a human book that does more harm than good, one person, 5%, and then 5 people chose choice number 6 for 23%.
And if anybody wants to, can you hear Alice? I see it says you can't hear or speak. You can hear though? Okay. Yeah, does anybody want to say, Chris wrote in the comment section, other, if anybody has another thing that they want to add as a way to think about the book, you can, either verbally or in the chat section. Does anybody burn in to add another definition? Well, those are the most common understandings of the Bible. There are some other ways to think about it. The Quaker is like the inerrant is the fundamentalist. Dawn says overwhelming. Yeah, yeah. There you go. That's a fair statement. You know, that's where the literalists are. You know, it's the literal word of God. I have a friend who teaches English in a very conservative college, and his regular argument with the religious leaders of it is there's no such thing as a literal word. The word is always a symbol that points towards something that, you know, nothing is ever literally a verbal or written statement is never literally true. But inerrant word of God is in that department. Inspired word of God can be almost that, but it also can be like the Quakers say that you can't understand the book unless you're in the spirit that gave it forth. And they say things like, we're so busy talking to the author, we forget to read the book. You know, it's, in other words, it can be almost irrelevant, you know, because the spirit's the most important, or it can be almost fundamentalist. So there's a lot of room there. You had a question, Jeff? Or
Well, inspired work of God. Who inspired God to write the book?
There we go. That's a good question. There's a Hindu statement that said, how was the world made? Only the gods know, and maybe they don't know. So we're in that department. John Buren's A Human Book About the Divine. That's a very transcendentalist idea. It's like the finite, the human reaching out to the infinite kind of take on it. And then a human book with mostly helpful insights. And that was me just trying to gauge with where people were personally, like whether this is a helpful book or harmful book. There's the title of this class is Did You Ever Get a Whippin' with a Bible Belt? So we are acknowledging that it can be a harmful book and it can be used as a weapon against people, and that's a important part of the experience. In the conservative tradition, there's a tendency to say the Bible is one book with one meaning for all people. And along what Chris wrote, it is quite, every historian will tell you it's a library of books that was written in different times to different audiences. And sometimes the books don't agree with each other. The book of James and the writings of Paul, they're actually arguing with each other. So it's that fits nicely in with the human book. My background was the Church of the Beatitudes, which is in Israel. It's on the site where the Sermon on the Mount was preached according to tradition. The ironic thing, and this is very ironic, it was built by Mussolini. So that just shows you how paradoxical the Christian tradition can be. that a fascist would build a church on the Sermon on the Mount, which is all about peace. You know, it's so. But that's part of the religious tradition, the paradoxes of it. So I wanted to give a chance for everybody to introduce yourselves. and maybe just say a sentence or two about what made you curious about the class, or something, you know, some reflection from that poll, just a little bit to learn about yourself. So who'd like to introduce themselves first? Hey, Chloe.
I think most everybody on here already knows me, Chloe Aroldi Waters. And honestly, I joined it, Chris, because you are hysterically funny. And this should be an exciting class.
There is humor in there, believe it or not. Yep. So who wants to go next?
I will.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in it because I think most religions come up with a series of writings because they're confused about understanding their environment or their world or how things happen or why it rains or why the sun comes up at that time. And so I just view the Bible as another one of those series of writings like you'd find in Buddhism or Hinduism or Shintoism, trying to figure out the world that you live in.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's distinct from, there's a lot of religion, when the Western world goes to Eastern countries, they say, what's your holy book? And like in Hinduism, the holy books aren't even the most important thing. The festivals are the most important thing. And so we're a very bookish in the West, people of the book. Who wants to go next?
Well, Jeff, go on.
Okay. Well, I came to religion kind of late and rather lackadaisically, but I started out as an Episcopalian. I remember being baptized. That's how late it was. And then in my mid-teens, I became disaffected with the church. When I started this graduate studies in German, the older texts that we read, Old High German, Gothic, Middle High German, were the Bible. So I read a lot of the Bible. I also wrote my master's paper on Thomas Mann's books about the Old Testament. So I read the Old Testament, at least the beginning, quite thoroughly. And so I, despite my distance from the religious tradition, I value the language of the King James Version. I was inspired by a service, I don't know when, about the Jesus Seminar. So I got the book, and I've been trying to read that and trying to see just how much of this that the text in the King James Version is what scholars think Jesus might have said, people in that area might have said. So it's a very amorphous kind of approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, to give you an idea of how complex biblical studies can be, you can get a computer program that'll give you the like the New Testament in Greek, and you can put a cursor over each word, and you can see every translation choice that the translator had, and it just it's a real exercise in realizing how many different ways a sentence could be translated. So, all right, let's go next.
Well,
I
I
will.
should probably say that I am not Eric Hansen, my husband, but I'm Stella Sue Lee Hansen, and I piggybacked his link. So I hope that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. Okay. You're muted. You're muted.
I'm appear to be 144282, but my name is Earl, And just the whole title of this thing intrigued me. I was raised as a Baptist in the South, and I've seen the Bible used all different kinds of ways to justify things. And I just thought this would be entertaining and informative.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks,
I'm Eric, and you can see my name up there, and I go with that blonde woman who is also wearing my name for the evening. And yeah, I think, living in Knoxville, which is technically not the South, but has very Southern traditions, I just really am interested in learning more about the perspective on the New Testament and the Beatitudes, and yeah, and I like hearing Chris talk. So yeah.
Good. All right. Let's go ahead. Ann?
You're muted, Ann.
Oh. We can't hear you. You're muted. There you go.
Hey, hello to Chloe and Jackie. And to 144282, I kind of related to what his comment was. I feel very ignorant in this Bible business, so I'm here to learn as much as I can.
Excellent.
And excited about it.
Good.
And
Who wants?
Hey, Rocky.
Yeah.
yeah,
You want to go next, Jim?
Are you related to Benny and Bobby Birdwell?
Yeah,
Ann?
muted now. Why don't you message her and
Talk about that.
oh, that's right. You can't use the chat. Sorry. Right.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that I had gotten involved with a lot of religious studies after attending a Seventh-day Adventist, but prior to that, I was kidnapped by my church because I was playing music at night in a rock and roll club and taken to the mountains in an attempt to get me fired.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Masons, I tried to start a conversation about allowing blacks in, and that's a really religious group supposedly, and they set my house on fire in 3 different attempts.
Wow.
So I feel like I've been beaten a little bit by the Bible, but I am in love with Islam and Judaism and Christianity, and especially the Unitarian Church. My goodness. But I can certainly find a lot of places where people have been harmed by the Bible, and I'm ashamed of what we've done in religion towards our fellow man.
All right. Thanks, Rocky. Who wants to go next? All right, Jackie.
I am Jackie Courtney, and I'm here because the title was very intriguing, and I knew that there would be a lot of views that were going to be brand new to me. And I knew that with Chris facilitating, there would be humor, and there's nothing on TV. So I'm
You
here.
don't have streaming channels? So, yeah.
So we're just an excuse.
Yeah, a replacement.
Okay.
Who'd like to go next? Thanks, Jackie. Patty?
I'm Patty Dorica, and I said that it's a human book that has done some good, written by humans, of course, with perhaps divine inspiration. But I was really glad to see you offer the course, Chris, and really have an opportunity to participate. So I appreciate that, and I'll just give a shout out to all the people who are here from PB&C.
All right. Okay. It's the PB&C is the first group I ever came to at the Unitarian Church. So welcome in.
Can I add one more quick thing?
Let's Roger, let's let everybody else get a chance to talk, and then we'll do that.
Okay.
All right. Who wants to go next? Mary?
I saw Barbara Taylor's hand up. I'd love to go after her or anybody else.
Okay. I can't see everybody, so I think
I'm sorry, Barbara Johnson.
or okay, yeah, okay. I can see everybody then.
The title of the course really intrigued me. I grew up in Wisconsin in a very, very extremely heavily Catholic family, and we didn't really study the Bible. And I really haven't read that much of the Bible, although I did take a Bible study class in college, but I don't remember much. And I never had a whipping. No one in my family ever used physical punishment at all. Yeah. So, which I feel very fortunate that I was raised that way. But I'm just curious what people have to say about this subject, because the older I get, the more and more anti-religion I get. And I was the one and only person who said I felt the Bible has done more harm than good. So that was me. I'm looking forward to what everybody has to say.
That's good. An interesting thing that I did not know for a long time is one of the reasons that Catholics do not place as much emphasis on the Bible is and this is historically accurate, which is the church is older than the book. And so if the church has a teaching that contradicts the Bible, the church is right. So I mean that's part of the but it is true. The church is older than the book. So yeah.
That is very interesting. Thank you for telling me that. I always wondered why we paid so little attention to the Bible. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to go next? All right, Alice.
Well, my name is Alice Woody. I was raised in a Presbyterian church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And when I say I was raised in the church, it's almost true, almost literally raised there. Every time the church doors were open, my parents and I were there. But it was the Northern Presbyterian Church. And so we took a very different take on the Bible. And frankly, the more I think about the conversations, if not perhaps the exact lesson plans that I had the privilege to witness or observe, it was a much more loving place than a lot of places where one would think about getting a whipping with the Bible. Or the Bible Belt. And, but I've always been interested in the Bible. If one hadn't had to learn all sorts of ancient languages, I could have seen that as an academic path for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I knew I wasn't going to learn those languages. You could just forget it.
There we go. All right. Mary, you were very deferential about, you want to go now?
My mama and daddy taught me some of that. My name's Mary Rogie. I was raised for a number of years in a small town called Clifton, Kansas, which is mostly German Protestant. And my dad's side of the family was German Protestant. We were raised Catholic from my mom, who was Polish from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I brought my mom's Catholic Vulgate Bible and my Harper Study Bible.
Yeah, there we
that
go.
We used when I was in college with a group of very curious and very interested in a number of different aspects of religion friends. I remember thinking I think I was probably in the 7th or 8th grade in Clifton, Kansas, when Mr. Balderson, our bus driver, said firmly and with the utmost conviction that anyone who had never read or been exposed, even if someone had not been exposed to the teachings of Jesus Christ, if they lived in the most remote island, were the best of people, the most ethical of people, had not heard of Jesus Christ, would go to hell. And that really started me in this place of thinking, something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
So I appreciate being here to learn more and keep learning about more contradictions. I guess I'm particularly interested in contradictions between the Old and New Testament and when the New Testament should win out.
There we go. Great. Okay, thanks, Mary. Who's next?
Go.
Okay, Lynn.
I'm Lynn Hixson. I was raised Baptist. We weren't real strict at home, so I never had a Bible Belt whipping by someone else, but it was more a self-infliction.
Oh, yeah.
So
I get that. Yeah.
But here lately, I've been real curious about, and you mentioned it earlier, about mistranslations of words. I've been reading different things of where before 1938, one word was something completely different.
Yeah.
And so that kind of fascinated me, and I wanted to, and plus the title of the class, I mean, who couldn't sign up for it?
There we go. Great, great. Yeah, self-inflicted wounds. Yeah, I get that. That's a good thing. Yeah. I have some of those. Who wants to go next? Anybody else? You can always pass if you want to.
I can go.
Okay.
Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm Lisa Thomas. I grew up as a Baptist, and I remember, I guess my first whipping would have been when I was probably around 5 or 6, because what I noticed right away is that when the teacher said whatever verse that we were talking about, everyone grabbed their Bible and flipped immediately to it. They had memorized everything, and I had no idea, like, whether I should go to the front of the book, the back of the book, the middle of the book. I didn't know, I just felt like I didn't know anything about it. So I kind of felt shame right off the bat from just not already having everything memorized, like where it was.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my first example.
Okay.
That's all.
Now, if you go to a service with Kickma and the minister says, get out the Bible, everybody pulls out their phone. So it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world. All right. Who wants to go next? Chris?
I'm agnostic. My grandparents and my parents were not churchgoers, so there's a long tradition of not paying much attention to religion. Although when I was in junior high, we attended a church because my parents thought it was important for my cultural upbringing. And I think I've become more aware of the Bible since moving to the South, because I'm an evolutionary biologist, and I never realized that might have career consequences in very weird ways. But I'm mostly interested in sort of comparative understandings of both different versions of the Bible and of other holy books. And what my understanding is that their underlying message is very similar, but how they get there is very different.
Yeah. You came to the state for evolutionary controversy.
That's right.
Got the Scopes trial, and so all right. I think Suzanne, did you get a chance to go, or is it who hadn't had a chance to go?
I haven't yet.
Oh, Esther. Yeah.
And Esther hasn't. Esther, you want to go?
No, you can go. I'll wait.
Okay. Well, I haven't studied the Bible. Grew up Catholic. Now I know why.
Yeah.
Or at least my parents are Catholic. I never went through confirmation or anything. I've changed my mind. And then I most recently read the Sermon on the Mount, and then I read every day around the year with Emmett Fox. So this intrigued me because of that, and I want to learn more, and I knew it would be entertaining.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay. Esther, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Esther. I actually just watched your service for the first time Sunday and heard about this class. I was raised really conservative, Church of Christ, and then my dad's side of the family was Old Regular Baptist. So as I grew up, I didn't really feel like I believed in the Bible that they were teaching me. It was very harsh.
Yeah.
And so this just sounded like a good way to maybe learn a different perspective.
Okay, good. Thanks. Welcome. Great. And Seth?
So I'm Seth. My interest in this stems from part of my childhood was spent in the Assembly of God evangelical version of, that, I don't know what they call themselves now, But I ended up there because my mother was searching for a community after our family was torn apart by trauma when I was roughly 10 years old. And so had a significant influence on how I was raised until at some point, I think we just became somewhat disenfranchised from it. And so I'm interested in hearing how that may have evolved with this class.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's see, who else hadn't had a chance to go? Myra?
Hi, I'm Myra Southern. I'm a member of Foothills UU Fellowship.
Okay,
and thank you. I took a comparative religion course at when I was a freshman at the University of the South at Sewanee, and it just totally turned my belief system upside down and kind of drove me away from the Bible. But I decided that after almost 40 years, maybe it was time to revisit it. So that's why I'm here.
Good, good. All right. David, did you have a chance to go, or you can always pass? All right, you're muted there.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is the commercial?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Oh, my name is David Booker. I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I spent most of my life in East Tennessee, raised Catholic. I lived in East Tennessee long enough that while I didn't get any whipping in the Catholic Church, I got all sorts of interesting looks from Southern Baptists and other people when they were Catholic. But the only thing that got even weirder looks is when a few friends of mine and I decided when they asked us what religion we were, we would say we're Islamic Druids. We worship date palms.
That would get a reaction, yeah.
And it's just curiosity. I studied some about the Bible and read some. I'm by no means any sort of scholar or even well-versed, but it strikes me as a book where people can pick what they want to back up almost any argument that they want to make. And I can't see where it's the inerrant word of God unless God is a schizophrenic psychopath, because there are breaks in it, the things that contradict each other. And I don't see how you can, make a remedy of them. I mean, there are even two versions of Genesis. One, you get taught the one about Noah having 2 of each animal, but in the Bible, there's also talk of 5 of each animal going, which makes more sense if you're talking from a genetic standpoint. So it's just curiosity. I think it can be used for good, but the older I get, particularly in the US, the more I see it being used for bad.
Yeah.
Used to justify positions that do not have any real moral standing, at least not any moral standing from where I'm standing anyway.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Did anybody else want to go that didn't get a chance to go? Okay. Tina?
Hi, I'm Tina Becker, and I was raised in the Evangelical Lutheran Church like my ancestors before me, Champaign, Illinois. And I never really learned any scripture. I remember making lots of puppets in Sunday school, and I went through confirmation. It wasn't until I moved down here in my 20s that I got involved in a Baptist Bible study with a bunch of women, and I learned a great deal of scripture, which I'm thankful for. But I've also have been subject to some strange observations about my upbringing as a Lutheran, and I was hoping that so many people could share some of your stories of some people's insights as to what they've run into. Like one example would be a bumper sticker I used to see around here that said, "If it ain't King James, it ain't Bible."
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was teaching a yoga class and some people dropped by and said that I was teaching Satanism back, this would be in the 80s. So I've just got a whole lot of funny stories, and I'm sure you all do too.
Absolutely. There we go. Okay. Yeah. King James, a late English translation. Yeah. So, all right. Who wants to go next? Anybody else, or is everybody happy to pass at this point, or?
Jim wants to return.
Yeah. Rocky, you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, real quickly. In my studies, I fell in love with the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. That's my gist of the Christian Bible. And in my Islamic studies with an interesting scholar, I learned that in true Islam, they are trying to teach people to live like Jesus in order to encourage his return. That was shocking to me, because that's certainly not what we see in Islam mainstream.
Yeah, Jesus is a figure. There's stories of Jesus in Quranic traditions, but yeah, it's probably more than we'll be able to talk about too much today. But yeah, that's the thing. So Jesus is a revered figure in Islam. All right, anybody else? Okay, so we're the theme is, did you ever get a whipping with the Bible belt? And it's really a recognition of how powerful the Bible is in the South. And Chris, you were talking about being an evolutionary biologist, and you would think you'd be able to do your job without having to know the Bible, but people will bring the Bible to you. I was on a panel for human sexuality regularly at UT, and the Catholic minister would be there, and the rabbi, and all these different people as interfaith perspectives on human sexuality. And it occurred to me that even an atheist would, all the arguments are biblical, that people bring to the question, so that even if you want to make a secular argument, having some knowledge of the Bible helps. So it's sort of like the canon that's in the culture, and people make references to the Good Samaritan and some of the different stories. So it just helps to be literate. But why would you study it as that's one reason to do it. The other reason is for very liberal religious reasons. I think the Sermon on the Mount in particular defies any literal interpretation. It defies any legalistic interpretation. And if fundamentalism is about literalism and legalism, I don't see how. You need to find a whole nother sermon to do that, because it absolutely is at odds with it. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Bart asks Homer, the dad, says, what is our religion? And the dad says, the one with the well-meaning rules that don't work out in real life. And and that's the Sermon on the Mount is certainly full of ideals that are higher than people will be able to realize, and that's part of what makes it impossible to take literally. It's these ideals. It's about kind of stretching yourself, but if you try to say, well, and Sermon on the Mount, check, did it, it's not really, it doesn't really lend itself to that. So it's really a chance to reflect on what is liberal religion, what is because in many ways, and in some ways, Jesus brings a humanistic approach to religion. So the other reason it can't be literal or legalistic is it's full of paradoxes. It's full of paradoxes. And so some floating phrases in this sermon and other parts of the Bible are: the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. The humble shall be exalted, the exalted shall be humbled. But they're, you know, if you try to literally follow those, you know, oh, I want to be first, so I'll be last. You're already missing the point, you know. You're you know, you're just like, oh, I'll beat everybody else by being last, you know. So it's an invitation to do self-reflection more than it is like a check off the box kind of thing. There's a story that's told in the Jewish tradition about a man who two men are praying in the synagogue, and one says, I'm nobody, I'm nobody, I'm nobody, and the other one says, I'm nobody, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. And then somebody else new comes in and says, I'm nobody, I'm nobody. And first guy turns to the second one and says, look who thinks he's nobody, you know. So you know, the things are full of things like that. Like, well, as soon as you try to do it, you know, you often miss the point. You know, you're trying to be nobody and you end up being arrogant, you know. So it's full of those kind of paradoxes, which make it interesting. The Unitarians in the 19th century and would often say we believe in the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus. And the Sermon on the Mount really is the religion of Jesus. It's not the one about Jesus that Paul, you know, Paul has a lot of ideas about Jesus that Jesus never teaches. So, you know, and so going to the Sermon on the Mount is a way to kind of say, okay, we've heard what Paul has to say. You know, let's go hear what Jesus has to say. And so those are some liberal religious reasons to talk about, to do it. The other reason is, I think sometimes we come into the Unitarian Universalist Church with our own wounds. I certainly got a whipping with a Bible belt. I had a camp counselor for 2 weeks who was to call him conservative or call him fundamentalist is unkind to conservatives and fundamentalists. He was the first person I ever met who thought I was going to hell before he met me. He didn't need to meet you, you know. I mean, he literally, you weren't saved unless he did it, you know. So which is just another example of how ego can get into, you know, I'm doing God's work, but you know, it just seems a little bit ego. And so I asked too many questions, and he performed an exorcism on me. So, but it made me realize that at the heart of certain religious traditions, it's an introduction to gaslighting. So somebody says you're going to hell, well, try to prove you're not, you know. I mean, can you really, you know, now that person can't prove you're going to hell, but they're sort of putting the burden of proof on you to try to, you know, make that, you know. So there is that kind of gaslighting treatment that can happen in religion. I had another example I can think of is a member of this church. We used to have a group called the Oaks of Righteousness that sung gospel songs. Do y'all remember the Oaks of Righteousness? It was African-American women choir, and they were all ministers. But I think for, you know, womanist reasons, a lot of African-American churches don't have as much empowered room for women to be ministers. So they had kind of their own movement and their choir, and they rehearsed in our space and would celebrate services with us. But you know, in the African American tradition, when you introduce a hymn, you get a sermon with it, you know. So they would introduce their hymns, and there was a lot of you know. And I would say we're worshiping together, and we're all going to use our own language. We're coming from our different traditions, and you know, it's because they use very Christian language. And there was a member of the church who said, I can't come on those Sundays. There's too much Jesus talk. And I said, well, tell me the story. Tell me the story about how that became hard for you. And this person told a really painful story about being literally whipped while somebody read the scriptures to them. That was punishment. That was punishment. And so I totally understand why you would have something like PTSD, when you're hearing certain verses or hearing certain names. And I said, I understand why you wouldn't want to come on those Sundays. I totally get that. And the next time the Oaks of Righteousness played, she was there and she was smiling. So the reason I mention that is sometimes we have stories that we need to tell that help us heal and help us, and sort of unlocks something in us that allows us to do more things in life. So another reason to look at the book is, it might, in the course of our conversations, a story about something might be important for you to tell that, helps in your own healing, maybe help us all in our own healing at different times. There's a story when Jesus is taken away by the soldiers. By tradition, the disciple Peter cuts off the ears of one of the soldiers to try and stop them from taking Jesus. And Jesus says, "Put down your sword. Those who live by the sword die by the sword." And he puts the ear back on the man and heals him. And so I use that as a metaphor for sometimes what we do is heal the wounds inflicted by the disciples of Christ. Some of us have gotten some painful wounds from somebody who's hurt us and in the name, or maybe self-inflicted wounds. And that's a wound too, kind of an inner voice that's hard to leave. So hopefully there'll be some healing along the way. And we're going to start with it's Matthew chapter 5. If you have have a book, you can. We might compare translations at different times. There are some of the more academic translations, i.e., they're trying to be academically credible, or New International Version, New Revised Standard Version. There's more than one. Jerusalem Bible, that was my grandmother's Bible. It's a very scholarly Bible. And then there's things that are more trying to that aren't as scholarly. They're just trying to write something that would be intelligible to people these days. So there's a spectrum of things. I think Lynn was talking about maybe I can't remember if it was Lynn, about the translations. There really are translation choices with each word. And so as we read a version of it, if you have a different one you want to share, like, oh, this is interesting. That's,
Chris?
Yep.
I want to know if anyone has a Lamsa. That's a direct translation from Aramaic to English.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of going through the Greek or anything else.
Well, the thing is that the earliest texts are there. I mean, Jesus spoke. So that's another thing to sort of back up for a minute. So nothing that Jesus ever said was written down for over 30 years or that anybody's been able to find. So for 30 years, all of his teachings are oral tradition. They are the stories are adapted for different audiences, as you do. You tell a story at work and you might tell a little different at home, or you might tell a little different with friends. It's just a natural process of the stories being adapted to who you're talking to. And so the Jesus who's in John is sort of floats in the air and has these long theological treatises. I mean, there are no parables in John, and in Mark, he's a storyteller, and Matthew, he's a storyteller. And so you get very different pictures and images of who he is. I mean, in the contradictions, it really is hard to feel that the Jesus in John and the Jesus in Mark are exactly the same person. They just don't always sound like they're describing the same person, because in Mark and Matthew, he doesn't do long theological treatises, so there's that. So it's written down. And so you get different versions of the story. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the ones that the church chooses to be the official canon. There's the Gospel of Thomas. There's the Gospel of Mary. There's the Gospel of Judas. I could go on and on. There's a lot of Gospels out there that are of the same time period that were important scriptures for different communities. And so that's just part of it. That's part of the non-fundamentalist way to think about the scripture, is to realize there were a lot of different versions of the story that went out. And in the early church, there was room for differences. It was okay to have different versions of the story. It was okay to have, there were some arguments. No, there's no question about it. The Acts has got some arguments in it, but there was no effort to codify and, but once Constantine makes Christianity legal, and then another emperor makes it the official religion of the empire, they want to standardize it. There's an effort to standardize it. I call it the corporate takeover of Christianity, because it's sort of like if you walk into McDonald's, you don't get pizza, because they've got this corporate standardized idea that people, when they go into McDonald's, they want a specific thing and they want to know what it is, and they want it to be exactly the same no matter where they go, no matter where they are. And so the corporate mindset comes to the church, and so that you go to the church and you'll get the same presentation, the same standardization of the experience. And even then, you still got 4 gospels that are very different from each other. So so there we go. I'm looking at some of the comments. So yeah. So let's see. The first, this is the first part of the book. The other thing I'll say is the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel according to Luke is the Sermon on the Plain. So it's not even in the same place. So, which is it? Is it on a mountain or is it on a plain? So there are actually different reasons that the authors probably put it there, but it just shows you there are very big contradictions in the Bible. It was a mountain or a plain. Very likely these are sayings that were and stories that were told all over at different times and in different places in different ways, and got compiled into one thing we call the Sermon on the Mount. So or the Sermon on the Plain. So we're focusing on the Sermon on the Mount, but we'll do some contrast with the Sermon on the Plain, because there are some, especially in the Beatitudes. So I put it in the comments section. Does anybody want to read the first line, because it's important?
I don't have comments in my smartphone.
Okay. Anybody feeling moved to read the first line?
And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. That's King James.
Yeah.
What chapter and verse are you reading?
It's 5 verses 1 and 2. And then the next line is, then he began to speak and taught them, saying.
Yes.
So this seems like just a very small line, but it actually is the source of a debate within the biblical studies. Who is this sermon for? Because he saw the crowds, but then he went up the mountain and he sat down with his disciples. So some people say this is not a sermon for everybody. That this is meant to be a sermon just for the disciples, just for those who have a kind of a special higher calling to the work. And there are those who say that it is for everybody. So, but this is the line. If you hear somebody saying, "Oh, that's a higher calling. Not everybody's obligated to do it." This is the line that they're using to say that. And the reason I mentioned that is it can be a bit baffling. Like, why did Mussolini build a church on the top of the Sermon on the Mount? It's got all these teachings about peace in it. So, Mussolini probably thought, well, that's for the disciples. We soldiers, we we do what soldiers do, you know, and that's so that doesn't apply to us. And so that took me a while to figure out, because I've always wondered why. And you're talking about in the Catholic tradition, not mentioned in the Bible much. I'd say in the evangelical Protestant tradition, you don't hear the Sermon on the Mount that much, or you hear it rationalized away, or given a gloss. You hear a lot more about Paul and his perspective. So the flip side of this is, you know, so there's two ways to look at it. This is a higher calling. So one of the ways to say it is those who are in the Catholic Church, the priest, you know, the priest has this higher calling, so takes the vow of poverty, takes the vow of chastity, takes extra vows that other people wouldn't take. And then householders would be informed by the values, but wouldn't be expected to carry them out completely. So, but traditions like the Quakers and Anabaptists, they're very much that this is for everybody, and anybody who, you know, most peace, you know, peace activists and peace traditions think this is a sermon for everybody. So there we go. All right, who wants to read maybe verses 3 through 5? I can put it in there, or somebody got a copy.
I can go.
Okay.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Again, King James. I also have the Jesus Seminar version.
Let's save the Jesus Seminar for the very end, and we'll say we'll see which ones were the ones they think he said and which ones they think were added later. That'll be. Let's get through. Who wants to read 5 through 7?
I will.
Okay.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. That's
Okay.
the seventh one.
Okay, great. All right, who wants to read 8 through, maybe go, I think 11 is the last one.
I have a question.
Yep.
Did you say you were in Luke chapter 5?
No, I'm in Matthew chapter
Matthew.
5. But
Thank
you keep Luke open, because we'll talk. We'll make a comparison in a minute. So keep Luke open. Who wants to read? I forgot where we're. 8 through 11.
8 through 11.
Okay. Somebody want to read? Yep. Mary.
So this is from my Harper study.
Okay.
8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. 10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you want 11 too?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Blessed are you.
11 and 12. Yeah, go ahead.
11 and 12. Blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. 12, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so men persecuted the prophets who were before you. Okay.
So one of the reasons it helps to think about who is being addressed is this a commandment for the masses or for leaders? One of the schools of thought is that it is for the disciples, and it's meant to be. It's in a sense it's for people who are in a position of power in the movement. So if you tell somebody who's powerless to be meek, that can seem kind of abusive, But if you're somebody's in a position of leadership and authority and you're asking them to be meek, then that has a whole nother connotation.
Right.
So that there is a sense that these are meant for leaders. Now the question of who's a leader is what the would be debated, among folks. I've studied at a Quaker theology school, so the people who took the Sermon on the Mount very seriously, and for every member to take it seriously was very, very important. So another way to look at it is this is a truth, is not just is this a truth for leaders or householders, but is it just true for, and his audience is Jewish, is this just true for people who are part of the same religion? Is this just true for Jews? Is this just true for, the later Christians? Well, people like Gandhi thought not, Gandhi was a Hindu, and he read the Sermon on the Mount and thought this was something that had wisdom for people of all faiths. And there are commentaries on the Sermon on the Mount by the Dalai Lama, and Thich Nhat Hanh, who died recently this week, has a book called Jesus, My Brother that has commentary on it. So I mentioned that because sometimes people look at a teaching and they say, I'm obedient to this teaching because I'm a Jew, I'm a Christian. It's about, I do this because I belong to this group. And another way to look at it is, do I obey it just because I think it's true? I would have arrived at this conclusion no matter what culture, no matter what religion I was raised in. And the reason I mentioned that is we're going to do some cross comparison with some of the teachings in the Tao Te Ching, the Beatitudes with the Tao Te Ching. And there are some startling parallels. When I was in college, I heard the Dalai Lama on the TV, and he was being interviewed by a reporter who asked him how he could say anything nice about the Chinese after they invaded his country and destroyed the temples and tried to eradicate Buddhism in Tibet. And he said, well, your enemy is your teacher. If you want to learn patience, if you want to learn forbearance, if you want to learn fortitude, you need a good enemy. You can't learn that from your friends. You can't learn that from people who are nice. You can't learn that from people who are kind. And he made no reference to the Sermon on the Mount, but that's exactly what I thought of when he said that. I was like, I've always wanted, love your enemy. Why would you love your enemy? And why in the world would you love your enemy? Well, your enemy is your teacher. Your enemy can teach you to be patient. Your enemy can teach you to be, so there's a sense that so one way to look at it is these teachings are trying to tap into something that you might discover even if you live on another continent or belong to an entirely different religion. So let's see. So one way to read these, and this will, you want to read some of the lines from Luke, Rocky?
What's chapter verse in Luke?
Yeah, just read the first. Let's see. Let me find the right one. Read 3 verses. The blessed or the poor part.
And you're muted, Jim.
Which chapter in Luke?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Now I thought you already had it, so I didn't look it up.
Well, I was at chapter 5, but that's where we started a while ago.
Did you get a blessed? Do you get the blessed or the poor?
Where is that in Luke?
Okay. Well, I'll do it verbally. So in Luke, it's not blessed are the poor in spirit, it's blessed are the poor. And then there's a whole section that says, woe unto the rich, so that it's not just about a quality of the spirit, it's about an economic condition. And there's a sense that the poor are blessed and the rich need to watch out. so need to be forewarned. So it has a very different feel to it. And I mentioned that just to say, because there are very different interpretations if you read it that way. There's a phrase I learned in the Quaker tradition, says the gap between you and the poor is the gap between you and God. So this, because once again, it's a paradox here, because if I'm poor, I'll get rid of stuff, but you're still trying to outdo your neighbor, as it were. So whether we're talking about poverty in an economic way or spiritual way, if you read in Luke, it's economics. And if you read Matthew, it's about a state of being. And there's the other way to think about it is one way of reading the Sermon on the Mount is to say, blessed are, fill in the blank. And the reason you're blessed is because sometime in the future, it's going to pay off, blessed are the meek, you'll inherit the earth. But, there's a sense that you do it out of you're being obedient to a teaching, but there's going to be a benefit later. So kind of a delayed gratification approach. But there's another way of looking at it that the qualities of mercy, the qualities of being a peacemaker, the qualities of humility, that these have value in and of themselves, are intrinsically value. They are, as Abraham Heschel said, simply to be is a blessing. Simply to be merciful is a blessing. Simply to be a peacemaker is a blessing. Simply to be, so that's another way of interpreting it. And it's in that way that I want to focus. There are some teachings in the Tao Te Ching that I think have interesting parallels. I'm going to put one in the comment section so you can look at it. So Tao Te Ching is older than New Testament. Whoops. Oh, I thought it would go better.
Can you spell that, please?
Tao, separate word, Te, separate word, Ching, Ching, the Tao Te Ching.
Thank you.
Okay, it's not letting me put all the text in there. It probably will the other one. This one was a little bit formatted differently. So let me just read it. So this is so Lao Tzu is known to be. Oh, actually, it showed up. I'm having really strange problems with Zoom. Okay, let me. So Lao Tzu is a sage in ancient China, and he never wrote anything down, and he decided he was going to leave China. And this is the legend, that as he was leaving, somebody said, well, before you leave, you need to tell me all your teachings so I can write them down. And so he did. And it's a very short book. And if you only read one religious text in your whole life, I always say the Tao Te Ching is it, because it's simpler than most religious traditions. I think if you study the Old Testament or New Testament, you often need to know a lot of history and know a lot about, there's just a whole lot you need to know. And these are fairly simple teachings. So here's one of them. And this is, they're not really chapters. They're more like verses. This is the 11th one. Who would like to read it? Yeah. Does anybody want to read that one?
I'll read that.
Okay.
We fire clay to make a cup, but we use the empty space in the center. We build walls to make a room, but we use the empty space they surround. We form a wheel to spin, but we need the axle hole to use it. The point, having something is good only to the extent that it makes nothingness usable.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, It's kind of one way to look at it is, it's the openness, it's the emptiness, it's the receptiveness that has spiritual power in the here and now.
Chris, I don't have my Bible. It's out in the truck. I picked up a Gideon Bible,
Mhm.
And so I didn't have my usual support. But I did find it in Luke. It's in the 6th chapter, and it starts about the 21st verse.
Why don't you read us the woes? That'll be the easiest way to. It says woe. Can you find it?
Woe. Let me see. Rejoice, but woe on verse 24.
Okay.
Of chapter 6, it says, "But woe unto you that are rich, for ye have received your consolation. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for ye shall mourn and weep." And in 26, "Woe unto you when all men shall speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets." And then it goes, "But I say unto you." You want me to continue?
I just that's the main ingredient that's not in Matthew, which is it's not only, blessed. There's a sense like there's almost like a blessing and a curse in Luke, and there's it's more about material poverty versus poor in spirit. So I just wanted you to have that kind of perspective. I'm going to share some other Tao traditions, but I skipped over what the Jesus Seminar says he really said in Matthew. So the thing about the Jesus Seminar is that they'll rate something red if they think he definitely said it, pink if they think he probably said it, gray if it's a question about whether he said it. They no agreement. In black, there's no way he said it. So, and they have scholarly reasons for doing this. If we're curious, the thing about biblical studies, we can go a lot of different directions. But if that's like a burning question in your mind, I can bring that criteria next week. So the blessed are the poor in spirit. They say thumbs up. Well, actually, to be honest, none of it's red. No, none of it's definite. But pink is, and this is their translation. Congratulations to the poor in spirit. Heaven's domain belongs to them. Congratulations to those who grieve. They will be consoled. Now here's what they say. He definitely didn't say. Congratulations to the gentle. They will inherit the earth. That's in black. Then next is pink. Congratulations to those who hunger and thirst for justice. They will have a feast. And the rest of it's in black except for gray. Congratulations to those who have suffered persecution for the sake of justice. Heaven's domain belongs to them. So there's.
Now, what are you reading from?
This is Jesus Seminar. They vote. They vote on what is likely to be what Jesus actually said, the historic Jesus actually said, and what is likely a later edition. And there's many examples of it. So they're not infallible. There is I've sat in on workshops with the Jesus Seminar. It's true. There's no question that there are later additions to what he taught. That he said, he taught something 30 years later, people wrote it down. There's inevitably additions. Something there is probably the kernel of what he said. And so that they're just doing scholarly work based on scholarly principles. And so I didn't want to get too distracted because that's a whole class in and of itself. But I didn't want, the way I look at it is people in biblical studies, people take different interests. And if you're a Jesus Seminar person, this is, this book, 5 Gospels, might want to pick it up and go that route. Some of you will be like, oh, I want to read the Dalai Lama's commentary on the Sermon on the Mount, and somebody else may want to read Gandhi's, and somebody else may, So
what's the title of the book?
It's called The 5 Gospels. Can you maybe with the background you can't see it? I can't tell.
I can see it. I can see it. Just hold it a little higher.
Yeah, it's the Jesus. It's by the Jesus Seminar. So
Okay, thank you.
So it's yeah. All right, I'm going to pull up another thing from the Tao Te Ching. There was a Unitarian minister who was a member of the Jesus Seminar, who's a really nice guy. So lots of people, they have, have to have the right academic background. Some of them are, Greek scholars, and some of them would be, other kinds of biblical scholars. So I find one of their criteria kind of like interesting but problematic. One of their things is if it would be embarrassing to the early church, then he probably said it. And their criteria for saying that is, why would they put it in? Why would they put it in if it was openly embarrassing? Why would they choose to put it in? So I always thought that was kind of a peculiar criteria. Okay, this is the Tao Te Ching, verse 8. Who wants to read this one? Oh, if I pushed it, have I printed it yet?
No.
Okay, now there it is. Okay. He's feeling inspired to read.
Where do I find it?
Oh, it's in the chat.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, I've got my chat open. So if you don't have your chat open, yeah. So there's somebody gave a link to the Jesus Seminar too. Great.
The supreme good is like water. Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you.
There we go. So that's another way to think about humility or meekness or openness, or and the Tao Te Ching is also kind of geared toward leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It's like leading without being overbearing, and kind of working with the way things move and grow, working with the life force, as it were. The Tao is not, is in the way that Jesus says, is the way. That's what one of the definitions of the Tao. It's a way. It's not a person. It's not a, it's a path. It's a way, and it's ineffable. There's a great line that says, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. So you're essentially trying to tap into an ineffable power. So
doesn't Buddhism do ways as well?
Yeah, that's right. I'm kind of I could probably do a comparison with multiple religious traditions all on the same verse, but I've kind of picked some that fit with that, because there's the thing about Eastern religions is, if you go to a place like China and you say, are you Buddhist, are you Taoist, are you Confucianist, they'd say yes. So it's not whereas if you say, are you Jewish, or you're Muslim, or you're Christian, no, I'm Muslim, or I'm Christian. There is more of a sense in the East of wisdom, taking wisdom where you find it. And so that's one of the things. I think sometimes when people from the West go to the East, they impose Western categories like, what's your holy book? That might not be the most, meditation may be more important than a book, or the holidays may be more important than the book. So one last Tao Te Ching that fits in with that. Who'd like to read that one? Okay, Jackie.
All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. If you want to govern the people, you must place yourself below them. If you want to lead the people, you must learn how to follow them. The master is above the people, and no one feels oppressed. She goes ahead of the people, and no one feels manipulated. The whole world is grateful to her because she competes with no one. No one can compete with her. I like they changed the gender.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I've used some different translations. Yeah. So you that meekness, that humility, that, you know, it's not like be humble and you'll get a reward later. It's like this is a value today, this is a value in this moment, this is a tapping into power in this moment. So they are there you go, there's some insights. We're running close to time, but so I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the Beatitudes. I think my favorites are many years ago. I saw it was after Jimmy Carter negotiated peace between Egypt and Israel. There was a picture of him and Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Menachem Begin of Israel, and there was a poster that said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And I lift that up as a value because, you know, studying other people's religion is being a peacemaking. And if you know much about that peace treaty, part of what he did was, you know, study Islam and study Judaism and, you know, help a Muslim leader and a Jewish leader find common ground to work together for peace. So that's, you know, it's one thing to say, I'll be a peacemaker, so I'll be a good Christian, but it's also to say that this is a value that transcends religious differences and transcends different religious traditions. We've had some people come and go. I don't know if it's by we're getting bumped off or whatever. Okay.
I was surprised to find out that Muhammad was sought out because he could bring peace to two separate warring nations. And they used to seek him out to do that. I don't know how familiar people are with that tradition.
Yeah, so they're, you know, and the other thing about Menachem Begin, Sadat, they were both warriors before they were peacemakers, so that was part of the transmutation. The other one I like is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for you'll see God." It's not, "Blessed are those with pure doctrine." Blessed are you with pure dogma. Blessed are you with pure theology. Blessed are, you know, that's a quality of the heart that's the most important thing, I think, is and I think that is a theme, you know. I think that is a theme, a fair theme. There is no theme in the Bible that doesn't have something you could rub against, like, oh, that doesn't quite fit with that. So, but I do think it is one of the themes, and you'll see that it's not only about obeying whatever the rule is, it's about the quality of the heart that you bring to it. So those are our thoughts. That's my thoughts for this week. So we'll look at more next week. Any questions before we?
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. And we'll take up from there next week. And you can find your own translation that you like. All right, take care.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You're amazing.